Welcome back to the channel, folks, and to celebrate the release of a brand new season for Call of Duty Modern Warfare, I found it would be appropriate to cover one of the new guns that we got along with the update. Now, if you're new here, my Ultimate Weapon Guide series is basically where I cover a gun and all of its main attachments in detail, both objectively from a stats point of view and subjectively. This is a beefy looking SMG with moderate damage who many of you, including myself, thought it'd be a successor to the UMP from Modern Warfare 2, but is it though? Is it that strong? Well, we're about to find out. So this is my ultimate weapon guide for the Striker 45 SMG. We do have a good bit of information to go over today, but before we hop right into it, I did want to mention that I edited this video and did my testing on DaVinci Resolve, which is a free video editing program, which was capped at around 60 frames per second. Now let's hop right into the basic stats for the gun. One of the most important factors for any gun is the damage profile. The damage you do is dependent on the range you are at, as well as the location of the body you hit. For the Striker 45, your max damage range, or the range you will do the most damage, is going to be up to 23 meters. There are 3 parts of the body that do different damage for this gun, which are the limbs, the torso, and the head. The limbs do a base damage of around 30 hit points per shot. We do have a torso multiplier, which is at about 1.13 times damage, which puts your torso damage at this range at about 34 points per hit. The head will also deal more damage, with a headshot multiplier of about 1.83 times damage, which makes headshots very deadly and can result in 2-tap headshots at this range, which is really strong. Body shots up close will kill in about 3 shots, which is also very nice. Once we get past 23 meters and up to 41 meters, our damage will drop down for each location we hit, where limbs will deal 22 damage, torso shots deal 25, and headshots deal 40 hit points. Here it's going to take close to 4 shots, and it'll take about 3 headshots to take down an enemy. From 41 meters to about 51 meters, we get another drop-off range where limbs do 19 damage, torso shots do 22, and headshots deal 35. And then last, from about 51 meters and over, your limbs will do 17, torso will do 19, and headshots will do 31 damage. This means that the Striker 45 will, in most cases, assuming you are hitting center mass, will be about a 3 to 6 shot kill, with headshots dealing a bit more damage, so headshots are definitely useful to go for with this gun. And since it is an SMG, it's possible the recoil may help to get those headshots a little bit more easily. The Striker 45 does feature a unique ammunition attachment that basically changes the way the gun functions and changes it into a 2-round burst SMG, and it features a new damage and new damage ranges and body multipliers. So if you're interested in seeing those values, I'll be covering those in the ammunition part of the video, so feel free to skip around if you want. The Striker 45 features a fire rate of about 661 rounds per minute, making it a moderately fast shooting SMG. Couple that with our damage and we can calculate about how much time the gun would kill theoretically. So assuming you are getting those up close 3-shot kills, the time to kill is about 182 milliseconds, which is very fast. Now if you land 2 headshots, the time to kill is even faster, with it sitting at around 91 milliseconds, which is almost instantly, and it's incredibly deadly. Granted, that's 2 consecutive headshots at close range. The base sprint out time for the Striker 45 is at about 9 frames or 150 milliseconds, which seems to be pretty standard amongst the class, and the base aim down sights time is at around 12 frames or 200 milliseconds. Overall, it's an SMG, so you can expect the handling stats to be a bit faster than most of the other guns in the game. Now before we go into the attachments, I would like to show you guys a master list of all the attachments minus the optics and how they affect your aim down sights time. That way you can always refer back to the sheet at any time in the video if you have any questions about a certain attachment. Now with that, let's go ahead and hop right into the barrels and see how they affect our range overall. We have 3 different barrels to choose from for the Striker: the 300mm poly barrel, the 400mm stainless steel barrel, and the 150mm stainless steel barrel. The 300mm and the 400mm barrels affect our damage ranges, so let's take a look at those first. Now the 300mm barrel seems to be bugged or coded incorrectly, because from my tests, they were showing that this barrel caused the maximum damage range to actually go down from 23 meters overall to 22, despite the in-game stats saying it increases your maximum damage range. It does lower aim down sights time as well, and because of this, and since I don't think the attachment is working properly, I can't really recommend this barrel at all, at least until they fix it. if it is broken, unless I somehow tested it improperly, but if anyone can confirm this, let me know in the comments below. The 400mm barrel increases our range, along with a slight increase to recoil control, and the max damage range goes from 23 meters up to 31 meters, which is a 35% increase, which is a noticeable increase in the damage range. Unfortunately, it does reduce our movement speed as well, which as you can see is in fact a little bit slower. It is noticeable over long distances, and it is definitely something to keep in mind, seeing as we want to be mobile with an SMG. But the damage boost is nice. It also helps with velocity, which basically means it'll be easier to hit your targets at longer ranges, as the bullets will more quickly approach the intended target. The 150mm steel barrel decreases our ADS speed, as well as increases our movement speed, and as you'll see here, the movement buff is ever so slight, and with an ADS time decrease of 1 frame, it does make this barrel useful, so if you want to be as mobile as possible, you can try using this barrel instead. For our muzzle attachments, we have some that are useful for controlling the gun's recoil patterns. Here is a picture of all the recoil attachments and their effects, as well as some that aren't necessarily muzzle attachments that do affect recoil. The muzzle brake didn't really help with our recoil too much, but the compensator attachment actually did help out with recoil control quite a bit by keeping it more in center than going as far left and right. It made it much easier to handle. The base striker tends to shoot upwards and to the left, so just keep that in mind when you're going for those long range shots. Since recoil is an issue, the compensator is an attachment that is definitely worth your time if you have trouble managing the way it shoots. As for the other muzzle attachments, there are 2 that affect our damage ranges, so we'll take a look at those. The lightweight suppressor had no other benefit other than sound suppression. It's not terrible, but it usually makes a difference if you're indoors and not outdoors, I found, because of how the audio is in this game. The lightweight suppressor does lower damage range by about 17% as well. Overall though, I prefer the monolithic suppressor because not only does it suppress your sound, but it also increases your damage range from 23 meters to 25 meters, which is a 9% increase. Not substantial, but it does stack with other barrels as well. The monolithic suppressor does add 1 frame to your aim down sights time, making it a little bit slower than normal, so that's something to keep in mind if you start going crazy with attachments that increase your aim down sights time. In the lasers category, we have the usual suspects, which is the 1mW laser, the 5mW, and the tack laser. The 1mW laser, as you can see, does tighten the hip spread a little bit, but the striker already has some impressive hip fire, so the difference isn't really huge here. When you add the green 5mW laser though, it gets significantly tighter, and it's pretty much a small beam coming out of your gun. And coupled with the reduced sprint out time, which takes it to 8 frames or 133 milliseconds from the usual 9 frames, it is a very useful attachment for those of you rushers out there. I found the green laser to be an awesome attachment for my rush heavy style of gameplay, and I totally recommend you guys giving it a shot. If you sprint or ADS, the 5mW laser will turn off, so use that to your advantage as well. The tack laser is useful in a different way, making it easier to stay on target while moving and strafing, and by improving our ADS time down to 11 frames or 183 milliseconds. Sadly, the boost it gives you to the aim down sights time isn't really that big at all, and I measured it at around 1 frame difference, so I don't really recommend running this laser unless you are dead set on making the striker aim down sights as fast as humanly possible. The green laser for the tack laser is only visible when you aim, of course, so that's another thing to keep in mind. There are many underbarrel grips to choose from for the Striker 45, and the most important ones in my opinion are the ones that help with recoil stabilization and control, of which there are 4 out of the 5. Looking at this picture, we're going to be focused on the Commando, Merc, Ranger, and Operator foregrips. While they all seem to affect the way bullets curve in some way, I found the best attachment for overall recoil reduction and control was the Commando foregrip. The Commando foregrip helped the most, and it did improve our aiming stability as well, making it more effective for landing your first couple shots on target at those longer ranges. The other grips just didn't feel as useful to me when using the gun. The only downside we have to the Commando foregrip is a movement speed penalty, which isn't as noticeable as any of the other movement speed reducing attachments we've seen. Because of this, I really recommend trying out the Commando foregrip. There are other stats affected by grips, like the Merc foregrip for example helps with hipfire accuracy, but I found the Commando best for me in particular. Now, even though I recommend it, remember that not all of what makes a gun good is objective stats and numbers. Sometimes it has to feel right, and even though some of the other grips help with some form of recoil control on the gun, the Commando foregrip just felt right, and obviously it helps with the recoil issue, so I encourage you to play around with them before committing to only one. For the rear grips, I found two of them to be most useful, the F-Tac G5 and the F-Tac 60 series rubber. The G5 reduces our aim down sights time by a small amount, taking it down to 11 frames or 183 milliseconds from the usual 12 frames. It's not a huge difference, but it also reduces our sprint out time, much like the stippled grip tape does for many other guns. Sadly, it doesn't affect it much, where I was only able to get a difference of around less than 1 frame. It doesn't give us that much of a boost all by itself. When you couple it with the 5mW laser though, holy nuts is it amazing. These two attachments together brought my sprint out time down to 6 frames or 100 milliseconds. This is blazing fast, and I mean it's fantastic for any aggressive players out there. This makes it my go-to setup for rushing with this gun, absolutely. The other attachment here is the F-Tac 60 rubber grip, which does help with recoil control, and yes, it does help mitigate that recoil some, but the choice here depends on your playstyle, and since I'm usually running and gunning, the G5 grip and the 5mW laser combo just cannot be beat. But if you are kitting it for range, try the F-Tac 60 rubber grip. In the stocks department, we have one which will help with our strafe speed, the FSS Guardian. This is a useful stock to run if you love to duck in and out of cover or to try and throw off your opponent's aim. The F-Tac Precision stock helps with your stability, but since some of the other attachments I like to run already help with this, I opt for a different stock attachment. The last stock, the XRK Gen 3, reduces our aim down sight speed by 1 frame from the base aim down sights time, and while it does hinder your stability, I found the ADS benefit to outweigh that negative. Keep in mind, as usual, that attachments do stack, so even if you want to have a fast aim down sights time, remember that stability can also throw off your initial shots, so make the right choices based on that. Although generally speaking, I like to kit out my SMGs for being as fast as possible, since I am more of a close quarters guy, and I consider myself well adapted enough to not be thrown off by a little bit more idle sway, unless I'm at really long ranges, which honestly I shouldn't be engaging people from that far anyway, since it is an SMG. For our ammunition attachments, we actually have something pretty unique, which is the 45 hollow point 12 round mag that we can equip, which effectively turns a striker into a 2-burst SMG. Before we go into that though, let's take a look at the 45 round mag attachment. Now the base striker has 24 rounds, which is actually kind of small to me, so having the 45 round mag equipped is pretty useful for those up close spammy moments you may run into, but honestly it's not necessary. I find I could still do just fine with 24, but I am reloading quite a bit. The only downside is our ADS time goes up 1 frame from 12 to 13 frames or 217 milliseconds. Not only this, but our movement speed goes down slightly as well. Again, not as bad as some of the other attachments, but still something to remember when you stack it with big barrels and muzzle attachments. But on to the juicy stuff now, so the 45 hollow point rounds. Now when you equip these rounds, you get a different body multiplier as opposed to the base striker 45. We get different damages for the limbs, the stomach, the chest, and the head. And since this is a 2-round burst, I will be showing damage values for the total 2 shots, and if you want to know the value for just one of those shots, you can simply divide it in half to get a basic idea if you're really curious. Our damage ranges also change, so let's take a look at all of this. The initial maximum damage range for the hollow point rounds goes up to 16 meters. Between this, limbs will deal 86 damage, assuming both shots hit. This is a high damage value, but of course it's a 2 burst and there is a delay between the bursts. The stomach has a damage multiplier of about 1.06x damage, so stomach shots do about 91 damage. The chest has a damage multiplier of about 1.12x damage, so chest shots do about 96 damage, and lastly headshots have a massive 1.79x damage multiplier, so 2-tap headshots will deal 154 damage, which is pretty insane really. Even at ranges, if you're hitting that chest area and scraping up a little bit, you can really lower your time to kill. Past 16 meters and up to 26 meters, the damage for the limbs will go down to 68, stomach will go down to 72, chest to 76, and headshots will do 122. Past 26 and up to 31 meters, it drops yet again, with limbs dealing 60 damage per burst, 64 for the stomach, 67 for the chest, and 110 for the head. So you can tell that headshots are definitely the way to go with this weapon, and if you're quick and accurate, these hollow rounds can theoretically be a really devastating gun to use. After that 31 meters, the damage drops to 42 for the limbs, 45 for the stomach, 48 for the chest, and 76 for the head. The rate of fire, or the rate between each burst, is about 203 rounds per minute. The key here is that, again, it is a burst, so it fires 2 consecutive shots very quickly. It is pretty easy to oversample this, so be careful not to spam that trigger too hard, and instead, focus on your accurate shots. It's a cool little attachment that really makes the gun feel like a completely new weapon, and it is a lot of fun to use. Now, I still kind of prefer the base full auto mode for my playstyle, but the 2-shot capability of this version of the gun is definitely worth trying and getting a feel for, and it is strong. On top of the damage it can do, it also increases your movement speed and reduces your aim down sight speed, but not by much. It's mostly the cherry on top of the already cool modification that it is. Also, keep in mind that you only have 6 bursts before you have to reload, so Scavenger is a useful perk to run with this attachment. Now that we've covered all of the stats, let's go over some basic classes I set up to get this gun kitted out for your playstyle. The first class is my go-to with a quick sprint out time and good range. This class fits a mix of both close quarters with some decent range built in, extending that 2-shot headshot range by a little bit. First, take the 400mm stainless steel barrel, the 5mW laser, the XRK stock, the F-Tac G5 grip, and the Commando 4 grip. The sprint out time for this class is 6 frames or 100 milliseconds, and the ADS time is about 12 frames or 200 milliseconds. For my next class, it's going to be longer ranged focus using the quirky ammo attachment, so you can use this as more of a medium range to long range type of weapon. First, equip the monolithic suppressor, the 400mm barrel, the 45 hollow point rounds, the F-Tac 5G grip, and the XRK stock. The sprint out time is about 9 frames or 150 milliseconds, and the ADS time is about 12 frames or 200 milliseconds. Now, this class is a suggestion based on medium to longer range. It is a 2-round burst, so be prepared to have to be a little bit more accurate than if you were using this as a base submachine gun. Of course, these classes are just suggestions based on playing with them and stats, so feel free to choose whatever attachments you'd prefer in the end. Guys, that about does it for my ultimate weapon guide on the Striker 45 SMG, and my thoughts on the gun? Well, it's an absolute beast in my opinion. It's definitely got an air about it that kind of touches on the UMP for me. It's got some pretty gnarly damage with a decent fire rate, and something about it just feels so good in my hands, and if you're aiming chest and up, you're going to absolutely shred through people with that high headshot multiplier. I highly recommend trying this gun out as soon as you can, and let me know what you think of it. It may be one of my new favorite SMGs in all honesty. It just feels that good. Some fast fire rate guns may give you trouble, and of course shotguns will if you come up against them, but this gun is no joke and you should not take it lightly. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I've been grinding this gun like mad since the update, so I hope this guide was useful and helped you learn at least something that you can take away from the video. Up next, I may be covering some akimbo pistol stuff, so if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date with my newest guides, as there are plenty more to come. And with all that being said, I want to thank you all again for supporting me after hitting 2,000 subs, and I hope you all have a wonderful day/night, and I'll see you in the next video. Brr.